She didn't deny it. That was the part that still echoes in my head. I asked her who he was and why she talked to him the way she used to talk to me, and she looked at me like I was embarrassing myself. Then she said it calmly, almost bored. It was just emotional. You're overreacting. No apology. No pause. No guilt. She leaned back and explained that nothing physical had happened at first, so I had no right to be upset. That emotional connection didn't count. That everyone vents. Everyone connects. Everyone does it. Her words landed heavy and cold, like she'd rehearsed them long before I ever asked. I remember standing there realizing something far worse than cheating had already happened. She wasn't confused. She wasn't ashamed. She had already decided I didn't deserve loyalty, at least not emotionally. And in that moment, as she dismissed my pain like it was irrational noise, I understood the truth with brutal clarity. The marriage wasn't ending. It had already been over, and she felt nothing about it. Before everything broke, our marriage looked stable from the outside. We had routines, inside jokes, shared plans. We talked about the future like it was a given, not a question. I trusted her completely. I never checked her phone, never doubted where she was, never imagined I'd have a reason to. Loyalty felt mutual, assumed, almost boring in how solid it seemed. We weren't perfect, but we were functional. Arguments ended in conversations, not silence. Affection was easy, natural. I believed we were partners, on the same side, facing life together. When something bothered her, I thought she'd tell me. When something bothered me, I did tell her. That was the agreement I thought we had. Looking back, I realize how much I relied on that version of us. It made me dismiss later doubts because they didn't fit the story I believed in. I held on to who she used to be instead of noticing who she was becoming. That version of our marriage is what I mourn now, not because it was perfect, but because I believed it was real. And that belief is exactly what made the betrayal so easy to hide. The shift didn't come with a warning. It showed up in small, deniable ways. She started texting more, smiling at her phone, then quickly locking the screen when I walked by. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd say just a friend and move on. I didn't push. I didn't want to be suspicious without proof. Her attention drifted. Conversations felt thinner, like she was only half present. When I talked about my day, she nodded but didn't really listen. When I tried to reconnect, she acted distracted or tired. I told myself it was stress, work life, normal things married couples go through. What I ignored most was how easily she emotionally checked out of moments that used to matter. She stopped sharing her thoughts, her worries, her excitement. That intimacy didn't disappear, it was relocated. I just didn't know where yet. I noticed the distance, felt it growing, and still chose silence. I thought trust meant not questioning. I thought love meant patience. I didn't realize I was watching the first stage of betrayal unfold quietly, right in front of me. The red flags were obvious once I stopped lying to myself, but at the time I wrapped each one in logic and denial. She became protective of her emotional world in a way she never had before. Passwords changed. Screens turned away. Conversations stopped the moment I entered the room. When I noticed, she said I was being paranoid and asked why I suddenly didn't trust her. That question worked exactly the way it was meant to. She compared me to others more often. Not directly, but enough to sting. So actually listens. He understands things without me explaining. I told myself she was venting, not realizing she was already emotionally investing somewhere else. When I asked why she couldn't talk to me like that, she said I was being defensive. Any concern I raised became proof of my insecurity. If I questioned a boundary, she accused me of control. If I asked for reassurance, she called it pressure. I learned quickly that speaking up only made things worse, so I stopped. I explained away my discomfort because confronting it meant risking the truth. What I didn't understand then was this. Red flags don't always wave loudly. Sometimes they whisper, and you ignore them because you're afraid of what listening might cost you. The first real moment wasn't explosive. It was quiet, almost insignificant, until it wasn't. We were sitting in the same room, doing our own things, when I made a small comment about something that used to make her laugh. She didn't even look up. No reaction. No smile. Just silence. I remember feeling a sudden heaviness in my chest, like I'd said something inappropriate without knowing why. I tried again, asked her if something was wrong. She sighed, annoyed, and said, "Can you not turn everything into a conversation?" That tone wasn't frustration. It was detachment. That's when it hit me. Not suspicion. Not jealousy. Absence. She wasn't irritated because she was stressed. She was irritated because I was interrupting something else, something internal, something she no longer shared with me. I felt like a stranger in my own marriage, trying to access a version of her that was no longer available. I told myself it was temporary, a phase. Everyone disconnects sometimes. But my body knew before my mind caught up. The warmth was gone. The connection was gone. And deep down, I felt it clearly for the first time. She wasn't drifting away. She had already emotionally left. Her words changed before her actions ever did. The way she talked to me became careful, distant, almost scripted. We slowly turned into I. Plans became vague. Promises softened into maybes. When I noticed and asked what was going on, she said I was reading too much into it. She started using therapy language like a shield. I need space. You're crossing boundaries. This isn't healthy. None of it came with conversation or compromise, just declarations that shut things down. Any attempt to express how I felt was labeled pressure. Any need for reassurance was called insecurity. What hurt most was how casually she minimized emotional intimacy. When I asked why she was sharing so much of herself with someone else, she said, "Talking isn't cheating." When I told her it felt like betrayal, she shrugged and replied, "That's your interpretation." No acknowledgement. No responsibility. Her language wasn't accidental. It was protective. It allowed her to stay emotionally invested elsewhere while convincing herself she hadn't done anything wrong. And with every dismissive phrase, she rewrote the rules of our marriage without my consent. That's when I realized the shift wasn't about communication. It was about permission to disconnect from me without guilt. By the time anything physical happened, the emotional distance was already complete. We were still married on paper, still sharing a home, but the connection that mated us was gone. She no longer reached for me. Not for comfort, not for validation, not even for conversation. I became background noise in my own life. She stopped confiding in me entirely. Her fears, her frustrations, her excitement, all of it went somewhere else. When I asked how she was feeling, she gave short, empty answers. Fine. Tired. Busy. There was no depth behind them, no invitation to come closer. If I pushed, she accused me of prying. At night, we lay in the same bed with a quiet distance that felt louder than any argument. Touch felt awkward, unwelcome. When I pulled back, she didn't notice. When I leaned in, she stiffened. I remember realizing I felt more alone next to my wife than I ever had by myself. That was the cruel part. The affair didn't start with sex. It started when she decided I no longer deserved emotional access. By the time the physical line was crossed, the marriage had already been emptied out. I just hadn't been told yet. Once the distance settled in, the lies started, but they were sloppy, rushed, and oddly unnecessary. That's what confused me the most. She lied about things that didn't need lying. Small details, timelines, who she was texting, why she was suddenly busy at night. None of it added up, even on the surface. She'd say she was exhausted and going to bed early. Then I'd see her online past midnight. She claimed her phone died, but it was fully charged when I picked it up. She said she hadn't talked to him in weeks, then casually mentioned something he'd said that morning. When I pointed out the contradictions, she didn't correct herself. She got irritated. That's when I realized the lies weren't about hiding the truth anymore. They were about control. She assumed I wouldn't push back. And when I did, she treated my confusion like an inconvenience. "Why are you interrogating me?" she asked, instead of explaining. I started doubting my own perception. I replayed conversations in my head, wondering if I'd misheard, misunderstood, imagined things. Meanwhile, she stayed calm, detached, almost bored, like the facts didn't matter. The lies didn't make sense because they weren't meant to. They were meant to wear me down. Didn't catch her the way people expect. No dramatic screenshots. No explicit messages. What I found was worse because it was quieter and undeniable. Late one night, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. I just glanced. His name was there. Again and again. Long paragraphs. Inside jokes. Emotional intimacy that didn't belong to me anymore. When I finally scrolled, my stomach dropped. She was sharing things she hadn't shared with me in months. Her frustrations, her dreams, her doubts about our marriage. He was validating her, comforting her, replacing me in ways that had nothing to do with sex. "You get me," she wrote. That line burned. There were no hearts. No explicit flirting. Just connection. Consistency. Priority. That's when it hit me. The affair had already happened emotionally. The rest was just a technicality. I waited for guilt to flood her face when I asked about him. Instead, she sighed like I was slow. "It's not cheating," she said calmly. "We didn't do anything." That's when I understood something terrifying. She didn't see emotional betrayal as real because she'd already checked out of us. The physical cheating didn't come out in a confession. It slipped through contradictions. Small cracks that didn't line up no matter how generous I tried to be. Times she said she was working late, but her location history showed a quiet neighborhood nowhere near her office. A hotel charge she brushed off as a conference mistake. A sudden insistence on privacy where there had never been any before. When I finally asked directly, she didn't panic. That should have told me everything. She paused, looked at me like she was deciding whether I was worth the truth, and then said it flatly. "Yes. It happened." No tears. No shaking voice. No shame. She explained it like an inconvenience. Like something that just occurred to her, not something she chose. "It was after we were already distant," she said. "You know that." And it didn't mean anything. That's when the room felt unreal. I was standing there realizing the emotional affair hadn't been a warning sign. It had been the doorway. The physical cheating wasn't a mistake. It was the natural next step once she stopped seeing me as her partner. What broke me wasn't the image of them together. It was how casually she stepped over the truth, like fidelity had been optional long before she touched him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I just asked her one question I had been holding back since the moment she said it just happened. "Do you feel bad at all?" She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, already emotionally somewhere else. "About what?" she said. Not sarcastic, genuinely detached. I told her exactly what I knew. The messages, the hotel, the lies that stacked up so cleanly they could no longer be denied. I expected something to crack. A pause. A sigh. Anything human. Instead, she corrected details. Time frames. Technicalities. "You're mixing things up," she said. It wasn't like that. Not once did she say sorry. When I told her she had betrayed me, she sighed like I was exhausting her. "You're being dramatic," she said. "People move on. This isn't the end of the world." That's when I understood the confrontation wasn't about truth. It was about control. She wasn't defending herself. She was dismissing me. And in that moment, standing across from someone who no longer even pretended to care, I realized I wasn't confronting my wife anymore. I was confronting the end of the marriage. What hurt the most wasn't what she did. It was what she didn't feel. Days passed after the confrontation, and I kept waiting for something to change. For her tone to soften. For regret to show up late. The way it sometimes does when reality sinks in. It never did. She moved through the house calm. Almost lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her. Not me. When I finally asked how she could be so okay, she looked genuinely confused. "I already processed it," she said. "I'm not going to sit in guilt forever." Forever. As if a few days was more than enough penance for destroying a marriage. She didn't cry alone. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't once say she understood why I was hurt. Instead, she reframed everything to protect herself. Emotional cheating didn't count. Physical cheating came after things were already broken. My pain became proof that I was too sensitive. That's when it hit me. Guilt requires empathy. And empathy was gone long before the affair ever started. I wasn't dealing with someone who made a mistake. I was dealing with someone who had already justified it and felt nothing afterward. Once it was clear she felt no guilt, everything I had been holding together finally broke. I stopped sleeping. My mind replayed the same moments on a loop. Her calm voice, her detached eyes, the way she spoke about betrayal like it was an inconvenience. I'd sit in my car after work, staring at the steering wheel, feeling hollow, like something essential had been ripped out and replaced with static. I tried to function like normal. I answered emails. I nodded in conversations. But inside, I was collapsing quietly. Food had no taste. Time felt warped. Nights were the worst. That's when the questions came. How long had she stopped caring? Was any of it real? Had I imagined the marriage I thought we had? The hardest part wasn't anger. It was the humiliation of realizing I was grieving alone. The person who hurt me wasn't hurting at all. She slept peacefully while I lay awake, chest tight, wondering how love could evaporate so completely. That's when I understood something terrifying. I wasn't breaking because she cheated. I was breaking because I finally saw the truth. I meant nothing to her long before she ever touched someone else. The shift didn't happen in a dramatic moment. There was no speech, no slammed door. It happened quietly. The morning I realized I was exhausted from trying to matter to someone who had already moved on emotionally. I noticed how every conversation followed the same pattern. I asked questions. She minimized. I searched for clarity. She offered indifference. I kept hoping that if I explained my pain the right way, she'd finally feel something. But every explanation just gave her another chance to dismiss me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't fighting for the marriage anymore. I was chasing basic human empathy. I stopped checking her phone. Stopped asking where she was. Stopped trying to decode her tone or body language. Not because it stopped hurting, but because I finally accepted that nothing I did would bring remorse where none existed. The power dynamic changed the moment I withdrew. She noticed the silence, the lack of questions, the absence of pursuit. But by then, something in me had already shut down. I didn't announce my decision. I just stopped chasing someone who had already chosen not to care. Distance came naturally once I stopped chasing. Not the dramatic kind, just quiet space where expectations used to live. We spoke less. When we did, it was practical, neutral, almost polite. The emotional weight I'd been carrying for months slowly lifted, not because I healed, but because I finally detached. Detachment didn't mean I stopped feeling pain. It meant I stopped hoping she would suddenly become someone else. I stopped waiting for accountability. Stopped replaying conversations in my head, wondering how I could have said things differently. I accepted the truth she had already shown me. What destroyed the marriage wasn't just the cheating. It was the absence of guilt, the calm dismissal, the way betrayal was treated like an inconvenience instead of a wound. When someone can hurt you deeply and feel nothing, believe them. That emptiness is the answer. If you're reading this and you're stuck trying to extract remorse from someone who shows none, stop. Love without empathy is emotional abandonment. Explanations don't matter when respect is gone. Cheating hurts, but cheating without guilt is the final betrayal.